Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Boom Pow Dissertation Showcase. Very nice. My name is Casey Cooper. I'm your host today. We have 8 doctoral candidates who will present their theses to our panel of distinguished investors, each of which has not $1, but $10 million to invest in our candidates' pitches. It's inflation. They said 4 million, but it's grown since then. It's now 40 million. Each candidate will have 5 minutes to pitch their thesis and shamelessly beg for money, followed by a short question period by our investors. At the end of the presentation, the candidates will leave the room while the investors chat among themselves and decide where they're going to put their hard-earned dollars. And hard-earned, I'm saying that's very loosely. You also have a chance to participate. You'll notice that there is a little slip of paper on your chair. That is a ballot, and after the presentations, you get to check off who you thought did the best pitch, and we will have a People's Choice Award, and we'll see how it compares with the investors. And without further ado, let's meet our panel of investors. Former Chief of Assistant Deputy, whatever, Chief of Staff. Or somebody. People change jobs all the time, okay? Okay, this person worked for Congressman DeFazio and recently was anointed transportation advisor for Governor Kitzhaber. Her fortune was made when she gained controlling interest in the businesses upstream from the CRC and negotiated mega payments for the project from potential loss of business. Join me in a round of applause for Karmen Fore. This investor comes from old money. Her father actually made the first waffle-soled shoe, and the idea was stolen by Phil Knight, who's been paying the family hush money for the past 40 years. Please welcome the Executive Director of Oregon Walk, Stephanie Routh. Knowing she was about to become the new director of Portland Bureau of Transportation, our next investor made her fortune by secretly cornering the asphalt market and selling it at a premium to the city of Portland for pothole repair. Say hello to Leah Treat. As the inventor of photo radar, he cleverly negotiated a percentage of every ticket the city of Beaverton gives out. Last year, raking in a whopping $3.7 million. And that's just from the one at Allen Street. Welcome Senior Principal Engineer and Chief Executive Officer of Kittleson and Associates, Mark Vandehey. This is going to be very fast-paced. Each of our candidates has only 5 minutes to pitch their case, and we did a random drawing, and our first candidate or victim is Sirisha Kothuri. I knew I could get it out. Who is going to, from Portland State University on her thesis, Incorporating Pedestrian Considerations into Signal Timing Design. You have the floor.
Thank you for that introduction, and today I'm going to talk to you about my research, which is incorporating pedestrian considerations into signal timing. Over the last 2 decades, there's been a tremendous increase in the active transportation modes, that is bicycling and walking. According to the 2009 Household Travel Survey, walking trips increased from 18 billion in 1990 to 42 billion in 2009. So despite these large-scale increases, few improvements have been made to the transportation system for these modes. Signal timing still largely remains vehicle-centric, and at many intersections and along many corridors, pedestrians are routinely ignored. The consequence of these actions are that pedestrians often face unnecessary and long delays, and this can lead to non-compliance and negative safety implications. Past research has shown that when delays exceed 30 seconds, this can lead to increased frustration and risky behaviors. So the goals of my research are, first, we want to understand what are the determinants of pedestrian crossing behavior at signalized intersections. We want to investigate factors that influence pedestrian delay, and then determine methods on how we can reduce this delay at various intersections. And finally, we want to develop a toolbox or a set of measures that would allow us to implement different pedestrian responsive signal timing strategies. So I'd like to quickly go over some of our findings. We recently conducted an intercept survey of pedestrians at 4 signalized intersections in Portland, Oregon. And we wanted to know what are the determinants of crossing behavior. And this finding, which was expected, is that more respondents or pedestrians implied that their crossing decisions were based on safety rather than compliance. So this indicates that safety is a greater threat than compliance, and people are willing to non-comply if they perceive the intersection as safe. However, safety is very subjective, and it varies from person to person, and this can lead to people taking or undertaking risky behaviors. So one way to increase compliance is to reduce delay. And we have implemented methods at various intersections in the city of Portland to gather pedestrian delay and actuations data. The actuation data refers to the number of times a pedestrian pushes the push button, and this can be a proxy for demand. So as these charts show here, this data is being continuously uploaded to Portal, which is our regional data archive. And this data can help inform the signal timing engineers about the baseline pedestrian delay that exists at intersections, and they can take measures to reduce this delay. We've also looked into different methods to reduce the delay at intersections. We found that by varying certain signal timing parameters such as permissive length, cycle length, and changing the mode of operation from coordinated to uncoordinated during the off-peak times helps us reduce the delay. So my proposal for today is once this research is completed, would like to implement the pedestrian responsive strategies at 5 intersections in Portland. The range of tasks are site selection. We want to upgrade the signal controllers that are existing at the current intersections to the newer 2070 controllers, which would then help us gather the data more efficiently. We would then analyze the data using simulation and other techniques and come up with a range of strategies to test at these intersections, and then conduct the after analysis. And finally, we would like to upload this data to Portal so that we continuously maintain our data archive, which is of use to both practitioners and researchers. So the contributions from this research are that it will enhance our understanding of pedestrian needs at intersections, and it will enable us to implement strategies that improve the intersection's efficiency for all users and just not vehicles alone. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to note that since she made the slide, inflation has also hit, and that's actually $360,000 that she's asking for her investment. Do any of you investors have a question for our candidate? Yes.
I do. I don't know if you can hear me. Is this on?
You can just take it off here.
Oh, I don't know how to do that.
You're running a bureau and you don't know how to take the microphone off?
I
do. There goes my job.
There's other duties as assigned.
So first of all, I want to say that I really am impressed with your project, because everyone, whether you ride a bicycle, take transit, drive a car, everyone's a pedestrian. So I'm really glad to see this proposal, and I'm curious how you would go about choosing the 5 signalized intersections to study.
I think we want to get a range of intersections. We want intersections where there is a lower pedestrian demand, but there's also intersections that have higher demand. So ideally, we would target both ends of the spectrum, I think. And a lot of it is probably just anecdotal evidence, but we also could use some sort of technology like video cameras, et cetera, to study the makeup of the intersections and see and determine it that way.
Any other questions? Sure. Yes.
So would you, two things, and they're not related. One, so would you maybe also look at safety data to see which intersections there, you might have that situation? And I heard you say that they track how many times this person pushes the button. And so we're going to look at, so are we doing an impatience study? I mean, because when I look at those people, I think you push the button like 10 more times. It's just not going to make it. So that to me seems like you're doing a study on impatient people.
Yeah, no, we get asked that question a lot. So we have logic. We have logic in the controller that actually just takes the first push button press and then puts a latch on, so we don't actually count the number of times if you're impatient. But yes, to your first point, definitely, I think obviously safety, and we also want to first put in our logic at different intersections, so we want to see where the delays are higher and then come up with strategies to implement at those intersections.
Thank you very much. Good job. Our next candidate is Wei Feng. Oh, yeah. He's ready to go. Here we go.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Wei Feng, a PhD candidate at Portland State University. Today, I'm going to talk about my dissertation topic called Modeling the Impacts of Signal Control and Traffic Conditions on Bus Travel Time. And mostly, I will talk about future steps about after my dissertation, not very detailed results, just to let you know. So first of all, I'd like to introduce the transportation hierarchy from POW. So public transit is very important, and by reducing bus transit travel time and also increase the reliability, there are lots of benefits. In short term, can reduce the passenger delay and also the operating costs from the agency. And in the long term, it can increase transit ridership and mode share, and as a result, to reduce the congestion and the emissions, and also increase the livability by reduce the car dependency and increase people's walking. And but there are lots of factors affecting bus travel time. As you can see, all of these factors, both internal and external factors. So we want to collect all the possible data we have and integrate them and do some very detailed statistical analysis, and to try to understand for each of the factors how they impact bus travel time, so that we can compare, for example, measures all the citywide intersections and segments to find the hotspots that that cause the most bus delay, and then to prioritize some investment to improve the system's performance. So currently, in my dissertation, I incorporated and integrated some data, all of these factors that related to these factors with the bus travel time data. And then probably in the future, we can include more data if we have enough funding. Yeah. As I said, the objective of this research is try to identify some places that cause most of the bus delay, and then by integrating all the data to do some statistical analysis, very detailed results to prioritize the citywide hotspot and to invest money to improve the system performance. I have one example for this one. So at Powell Boulevard, 39th and 50th Avenue are the two major intersections along the Powell Boulevard running east and west. As you can see, there are on the westbound 39th and the eastbound 50th, there are two queue jump lanes for buses. So we have found statistically significant that bus for this two approach has very few, not very few, compared to the other approach, they have 4 to 8 seconds average, 4 to 8 less travel time delay or quite delay on average compared to the other approach without queue jump lanes. And also the two different queue jump lanes has different benefits. Like this one, cars have to turn right, every right turn car has to stop. And this, at 50th East, eastbound, they don't have to stop. So they also show statistically significant difference in terms of reducing bus delay. So here are two examples, and then to request some funding for future research. First, these are some hypothetical numbers, not very accurate, but I want.
And first, you have to put the inflation factor in. So.
First, I want require 100,000 to complete the current research on Powell Boulevard, and then I want to integrate more data set to include more impact factors in my statistical model, and also additional $100,000 to analyze and propose some strategies and analyze the cost benefit of the strategy, and then another $100,000 to evaluate before and after performance, how the strategy actually performed, and then expand the approach to the citywide, and that would cost that will cost more, and I don't know, maybe $700,000. Yeah, and quantify the cost benefit.
So right now you have $1 million requested, and with our inflation factor, he wants $10 million. Okay.
Okay.
Do you have any questions? Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I guess my question, why Powell specifically? Does this have anything to do with the high capacity transit plan?
Why we choose Powell is because we have many data, multimodal data from Powell. We have the bus AVL APC data, and also 5 seconds bus automatic location data, like a trajectory data, because high resolution. We have the SCATS signal, adaptive traffic control signal data, signal phase, and also traffic movement data. We have traffic sensor data. We also have Bluetooth data, a lot of data. So that provides us this unique opportunity to integrate all of the data and do a very detailed statistical analysis.
Other questions?
Yes.
Wei, that was a great presentation. It's a very interesting topic. My question is, what do you see as the biggest impediments to this research? If we give you our hard-earned money, we really want to know that this is going to be spent well. So what do you see as the biggest impediments to implementing this research successfully?
The biggest impact.
Risks.
Risk. The biggest risk would be I think the strategies, whether the cost-benefit analysis. I didn't calculate the cost-benefit, like implementing a queue jump lane and the impact to other traffic and side street, and the savings from that queue jump lane to the transit users and the potential more transit users, whether some strategies will actually economically beneficial.
Thank you. Good job. Our third candidate is Medha Jannat. Are you here? There you are. Who is going to discuss mitigating right hook crashes at Signalized intersections.
Sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mafruhatul Jannat. My name is a kind of little bit confusing. Sometimes it's Medha Jannat. This is my last name. Sorry for the confusion. I'm a PhD student at Oregon State University, and being a traffic engineer, my major concern is safety. And living in Oregon, which is one of the top, I would say, bike-friendly state, as stated by the League of American Bicyclists, bicyclist safety is a major priority to me. As Dr. Jennifer Dill mentioned in her presentation, that intersection is one of the major point of conflicts for bicyclists. One of the major, I would say, most common and potentially severe type of crashes that occur at intersection nowadays is right-hook crashes. And that is the topic of my PhD research that I will present today. After enough of my talking, I'd like to start with a video now. No, he couldn't survive. So while this video served as a motivation for my research, I first felt the need for this research when I read the news of a woman killed in May 2012 in a right-hook crash at Portland, Oregon. And as I analyzed further with this research, I saw that there were almost 952 right-hook crashes occurred between 2007 to 2010 in Oregon. Another study conducted by NHTSA on 3,000 bicycle crashes in 6 US states showed that 4.7% of those crashes were categorized as right-hook crashes that occurs between a through-moving bicyclist and a right-turning motorist at an intersection that is showed by this figure. So these data act as a motivation for my research further to do a PhD research in my career. As I further do the research, I found that there were very limited research on this topic. Some of the possible reasons can be low crash frequency at the state level, and also gaps in the crash reporting forms at the national level that can identify specific type of bicycle crashes. And also we couldn't find any intersection treatment that can potentially reduce the severity and frequency of this severe crash type. This gap in the current literature motivated me to pursue the research that will help to mitigate these gaps and to improve safety for the bicyclists. I also believe to improve safety and to before proposing any new solution, it is really important to better understand the crash causality, and therefore my research will mainly focus to identify the root causes or the factors that will lead to this type of crashes. So who is at fault? Since either of the party involved in the crash can be at fault, a study found that motorist behavior was mostly contributed to this type of crashes. Fortunately enough, our research group at Oregon State University has the expertise to analyze transportation user behavior, especially driver user behavior, and the driving simulator lab at Oregon State University is a very powerful and cutting-edge technology to do that kind of research. So my PhD research will focus on analyzing mostly motorist-related contributing factor related to these crash types. While analyzing the contributing factors, we found that the typical type of crash at intersection is related to visual search pattern of the motorist. We found that motorists tend to look at the oncoming conflicting vehicles and fail to notice the bicyclist at their right before turning. So visual search pattern will be a contributing factor as we anticipated for this type of crash. Another factor, inadequate surveillance, where motorists look for the bicyclist, but they cannot detect or comprehend the information that a bicyclist is present at the intersection, is another contributing factor for this crash. Therefore, crash avoidance behavior will be another factor that we plan to analyze through our research, where we will try to determine whether motorists can detect the bicyclist in a timely manner and then take appropriate decision based on that for like turning or stop or yield for the motorist. So crash crash avoidance behavior will be another factor that we will analyze in our research. Another study showed that motorists were less aware of the active pedestrian or bicyclist before turning, so that also contributed to the crash. So situation awareness of motorists will be another factor that we will analyze through our research. As Dr. Chris Monsieur has given a brief and nice introduction of our driving simulator, this is a 2009 Ford Fusion sitting on a motion-based platform, and it helps us to analyze motorist behavior by exposing them to some crash-likely scenarios and also the virtual environment created in the driving simulator. So we will use that to analyze our driver behavior for our research. We will also use the ASL mobile eye tracker to determine the subject's glance pattern for this research. That is very important to detect any kind of hazard on the roadway. And after gaining knowledge on these factors, I plan to study some of the potential mitigation strategies to improve the safety for this type of crashes. That may include some low-cost solution, for example, signs, bike stencils, colored pavement marking, bike boxes, to some high-end solution like traffic signals. And for that, the practical need for my research comes where we need money. We need money to improve safety by mitigating potential risks. We need money to conduct this research in our simulator lab, pay for the research staff, pay for the poor graduate students like me, compensate for the subject testing at the simulator lab, do some testing of the potential mitigation strategies in the lab, as I mentioned. And finally, after finding some of the potential mitigation strategies, we also plan to implement those candidate strategies in the field and do a before and after study to see their effectiveness to improve the bicyclist safety. And for that also, we need adequate funding. So this is where I will need the funding from our panel today. And this is a brief summary of my research today. Thanks to OTREC for giving me the opportunity to present my research. And with that, I would like to take any questions. Don't worry, this is not the solution I'm going to propose. And I assure you, my solution will be much better than this one.
Have a question? Yes. So, we at PBOT are very interested in, right hook crashes and any kind of crashes involving cyclists, pedestrians, et cetera. But so one of the things that I noticed in your proposed testing is that there's only going to be one kind of car sitting on the simulator testing the right hook crashes, and I'm just wondering if you're going to bring in different size types of vehicles to test for right hook crashes.
This is a very good point. Actually, my research will mainly focus on drivers' behavior and how drivers look at the intersections. So the type of crashes, our curve represents the regular vehicle at the roadway, and we are not analyzing the heavy vehicle in this case. So this curve represents the regular curve on the roadway, and drivers' behavior is the main analyzing factor for our research here. We do not anticipate different kind of vehicle will have impact on this research.
Other questions from the investors?
So this might have just been part of your strategy, but I don't think I got a specific dollar request.
Pardon?
Blank check, or is there a specific amount that you want?
That would be an awesome thing if that would be a blank check. But,
So you want the whole 40 million? Is that what we're hearing?
that would be awesome. And that will help me to ensure more that my possible mitigation solution will not be like my last slide, for sure.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Mohammad from OSU, who's done a study of safety and efficiency benefits of traffic signal countdown timers.
Hello, everyone. My research interest is to explore potential safety and efficiency benefits of traffic signal countdown timers. Now, at first, I'd like to give a brief explanation of what I'm actually talking about is traffic signal counter timer. So what is it? So most of us, I guess all of us have seen probably a signal like this, and it is what you were thinking it is. It's a pedestrian signal with a countdown timer with it. But for the vehicles, we have the counterpart would be a traditional signal with a countdown timer placed right next to it. The difference is just that it's a different device. I mean, it's not attached like the pedestrian signals. And the reason we don't get to see this kind of timers in the United States because it's not the current practice for the signal. And the current version of METCD mandates the use of countdown timers for all new installation of pedestrian signals. However, it prohibits any kind of advance warning to the vehicular signals, even it comes as a in form of a countdown device. So I'd also like to see I'd also like to talk a little bit about how these devices work. So it's like in the traditional intersection, we have a traffic controller and and the signal head, which is controlled by the traffic controller. But the one that has a countdown timer has two additional devices. First is a timer control, and the other one is a display screen. So the timer control takes information from the traffic controller, and it then sends, it then displays the information to the driver through the display screen. Now, one thing to notice is that this color in the timer will be the same as the color on the signal indication, so that the driver knows that this is the time, this is the remaining time for this signal indication. And why using this kind of devices? Because first, we already have pedestrian countdown timers in place, which the research found that in the United States, there's a very high level of comprehension for this kind of devices, and which is very similar to the one that I'm talking about. So expectation is that will also have a very good level of comprehension. And another thing which is pretty interesting is that it was found that drivers are already using the information available in the pedestrian countdown timer when they're actually crossing the intersection to make their decision. So METCD's prohibition of using advance warning for the vehicular traffic is actually not in effect in reality. And in addition, there are many countries around the world that are already using this kind of devices. Predominantly countries in Asia and Europe are using this kind of devices, and there are also some countries in South America which were applying it, and they're reporting very positive outcomes both in terms of safety and efficiency. Now, talking about positive outcomes, let's see what are the possible applications of this kind of possible applications of countdown timers. First is a red countdown timer, as a yellow one, and it can also be used with a green signal. And the expected positive outcomes for a red signal countdown timer is that it is expected to reduce the startup loss time, and by doing so, it is likely to reduce the delay and increase the throughput at the intersection. And for the yellow timer, it is likely to reduce the number of red light running, which is definite improvement of intersection safety. And for the green one, the green timer is likely to influence the drivers to stop before the end of green, and it is also likely to reduce the dilemma zone issues. And that potential outcomes actually constitute my research questions. First one, I'd like to see if rate timers really reduce the startup loss time. And that can be measured by measuring the mean headway or the perception reaction time for the first vehicle in a standing queue. And for the YOLO timer, I'd like to see if it actually increases the probability of stopping before the start of red light. And the green one, I'd like to see if driver actually accelerate when they see the green light is ending, which has been observed in many countries. And so I'd like to see if that happens. And to answer these questions, I would use two tools that we have at our disposal. First is a cool driving simulator that Medha already showed you guys. It's a very cool driving simulator that we have at Oregon State, where you can develop very realistic driving environment, which provides very high fidelity driver behavior data like driver speed profile, acceleration, deceleration, and lane positions. And the other tool is a post that I plan to use is a post-drive survey of the drivers to see if the drivers actually understand the signal, this new kind of signal display, and to see if they think that this information is actually useful for their decision making, and to find which configuration will work best in terms of their understanding. And for the funds, as I just talked about, the simulation making the simulation environment and subject recruitment for the test, that will all require some investment. But a majority of the majority of the fund will be used for the field demonstration, which I think is a very logical next step after the simulation study, to resolve the results from the simulator findings. And that will be followed by user survey. And these are I'm talking about statewide application of this test. So I haven't gone through cost analysis, piece by piece. So I'd probably say, give all your monies I will be spending, and I'll stop, and I will not stop until METCD shows thumbs up to the the traffic signal countdown timers. So yeah, that's that. Yep.
Questions? Okay. So I feel this. I'm sorry, it was made for me. So my dad's last speeding ticket was 106 and a 45. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And he was a pit crew. I know. He was pit crew for a racing team. And part of the thing is that pole position is the countdown timer to go, and that is kind of what you're focusing on. So kind of to the previous dissertation, is there any part of the research that looks at what safety behavior, visual behavior of, kind of that fixation versus other road use in intersections?
No, I already told you that drivers are using the information when I'm talking about the US drivers, they're using the information from the pedestrian countdown timer, which is not directed towards their, towards the direction of their movement. They're they're looking away from where they're actually supposed to look at. So if this timer is there,
unless there's someone walking in the crosswalk. Sorry.
So how does it? I don't. All right. So I don't see how that conflicts with the view. Direction of.
Wow, for your dad, for starters. But, so, do you, this is a weird question, but I'm thinking of being at red lights and people, like you just see them reading their phones. Do you hope this will also get people to stop reading their phones and do other things like watch the signs so they go when it's time to go? Or, you know what I mean? Like, this, you laugh, but come on, how often do you mean, it drives me crazy. But do you hope that people are paying more attention? Because I never use the pedestrian counter myself when I drive. But do you hope that this gets people more focused on the line of sight when they're driving? Is that the intended goal, the directed line of sight of the road?
It's not
more
it's
efficient
not the
flow?
No, I mean it's not the primary goal that that they're looking at this. The goal is to improve the intersection efficiency, which is in almost, with very little exception, with almost all the research found that the red, especially the red signal countdown timer, increases the efficiency because they reduce the, so they're watching actually, so they reduce the startup loss time, they increase the driver, they alert the driver, right? They alert the driver. So by doing so, it's almost definite improvement of intersection efficiency, but for safety, there are varying results. So.
All right. I noticed that our OSU candidates want
Question?
all the money, whereas the PSU students are willing to share. Let's see what Jonathan Mueller has to say. Jonathan is doing alternative transportation connectivity and the high-speed rail alternatives analysis.
Yes.
Okay, I'll let you do that then.
I'm going to want all of it and then some, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. Does anybody have motion sickness? I apologize in advance. We thought we'd have a little bit of fun with this presentation and go with it, so whoops, we're starting here, but just wait, it gets better.
Blair Witch Project.
Thanks everyone for coming to the Come On Ride the Train Whoop Whoop session. I will be talking about bicyclists and pedestrian consideration and rail development. So right off the bat, why are we talking about rail? I thought that was hip a couple of years ago and not so popular now. But there is a renewed interest in rail in the United States. This map shows 11 Federal Railroad Administration designated high-speed rail corridors that are currently under study or getting investments for upgrades and enhanced passenger rail. Oregon is currently in the process of selecting a preferred alignment for the southern portion of the Pacific Northwest, or the Cascades Corridor. These, we'll get to this in the funding portion, these investments are not cheap. We're talking on the order of billions with a B of dollars. And to get the most out of our investments, we need to consider all users of the system and look forward rather than backwards. So intercity rail allows people to travel over longer distances, but it does not provide a complete trip. You can't walk outside your door, get on a train, and drop you off right at your destination. Some people, very few circumstances do that, but we're working on that too. But until then, we need to consider how people access rail and then how they leave rail and get to their destination. For instance, traveling just blown up on Oregon City and Albany, the red dots are showing an origin and a destination. And as you can see, they don't lie exactly on the rail alignment, but how people get from that origin and to their destination impacts their complete trip and greatly impacts their experience on the trip. So the connectivity, or how easily these trips can be made, is one of many considerations, as you can see in the rail line process. The Federal Railroad Administration requires a two-tier National Environment Policy Act, or NEPA, review to receive federal funding for intercity rail. The first tier focuses on selecting a preferred alignment, and the second tier is where more detailed work can be done to focus on how the access and egress trips can be done. This works good in theory, but it can also lead to alignments being selected that do not connect well for all users. For example, in the Midwest, the Twin Cities to Milwaukee study selected a preferred alignment that bypasses Madison, Wisconsin by over 20 miles, which in theory, it can work well for some transportation users. But I think from the keynote speaker and from some of the morning sessions, transportation trends are showing more people are choosing other transportation modes, and these need to be considered as well, such as biking, walking, transit, car share. And when alignments do not connect well with cities, such as the Madison example, these forms of transportation become less practical or even infeasible. So our experience from Europe shows, this is a train station in Copenhagen, that well-connected cities, people will choose to walk and to bike. Bicycling and walking requires lower investment costs compared to other options, such as adding transit or providing parking at stations. And it also does not offer or have a transfer penalty. When you get to a station, you don't have to sit and wait for a bus or the train to come. And if your train, Amtrak currently has a 62% on-time rate in the state of Oregon, so if you're running a little bit behind schedule and you miss that bus, you might be there for a while. So bicycling and walking have a lot of positives. So based off of that, these are 3 goals that we want to do with our research to consider bicyclists and pedestrians in the rail development process. The first is evaluating pedestrian and cyclist access, and are using research that shows most people use intercity rail to get for education, to access residences and workplaces. And we're also looking at attraction centers such as convention centers. And we're evaluating if these are within a reasonable distance and if pedestrians and cyclists can access these destinations safely and efficiently compared to other modes. And so to do this, we're looking at the route, the infrastructure, and we're using the low-stress bicycle network methodology out of the Medha Institute to assess if this can be done. We looked at the current Cascades alignment, and we're also using the proposed alignments that are being considered in the Oregon study that is currently underway. The second, we're looking at the feasibility of completing these trips intercity, so not intracity, but traveling along the corridor. And to do this, we're using data from the Oregon Household Activity Survey, and ODOT just recently completed a passenger rail survey of passenger trips, was included on that. And so it's building off the access methodology and examines how well or how many of these trips could be done in a safe and efficient manner compared to vehicles. And the third thing, what we're trying to get out of this research is working with a researcher out at Texas Transportation Institute, we developed a rail line screening tool that's based off of multi-criteria decision making. And so a couple slides ago, I showed all the considerations that go into rail line development, and it was quantitatively comparing these measures against each other. And so we want to build a bicycle and pedestrian connectivity score and compare that against the other considerations to see how well that scores. So, funding. We were looking longer term on a project that could benefit Oregon and something that can be done now. Rail development takes years. We're in the process of selecting a preferred alignment, but trains enhanced service wouldn't be until about 2020 or later. So what we're proposing is to implement a connected bike share system along the Cascades corridor for Oregon. And there's a picture of Car2Go on here because currently there's bike share systems across the US, and I like to use them when I go and visit different destinations. But you always have to sign up for a different membership or use a day membership. But it'd be great if there was some standard to use across. So we were proposing to do like an Oregon bike share pass that can be used at the different cities that have bike share. And we would implement bike share at the different stations in the communities around that. And based off of those trips, we can see if that helps increase the bicycle mode share for access and egress trips. So to do that, it's really expensive, and 40 million at least to start with that. But if you don't have $40 million to give, you could do something less and maybe do like a car for the Beaver connector to Corvallis or something, so to access the Albany station. So thank you. That's my presentation.
So I'm clear, so your proposal isn't about implementing a high-speed rail system.
That would be great. We can all go to Vegas and we have $40 million to see if we can turn that into billions.
Anything's possible.
Yeah,
that's
so.
right. But it really, so so in lieu of high-speed rail, you're looking at within the cities on the Amtrak line, can you do a bike/car share when people arrive at the specific stations?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, the research proposed for this, we was a little bit fuzzy when we were talking about it, and we thought it would be fun to propose a bike share for future study to see if that, we know the travel behavior currently going on along the corridor, and just to see if a bike share could increase the bicycle mode share for access and egress trips.
Other questions?
If I give you more money, would you include studying whether that increases business trips in the surrounding area by those bicycles?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's... How much are we talking?
Could you get one that goes to my house?
Yeah, the door-to-door.
Yeah.
Yes. So. Excellent. Well, thank you, guys.
Next up, we have Nicole, Iroz, and Elardo.
You got it.
Yay! Portland State, can health influence transportation decisions?
All right, so I'm Nicole, Iroz, Elardo, and I am in the urban planning, the Urban Studies and Planning PhD program here at Portland State University, so I'm bringing some of the social studies into today's presentations. I also want to acknowledge that I have just signed on to do a health impact assessment with the state of Oregon. I am here today only with my candidate hat on because I would not, and let the record show, I am not lobbying for money for the state. So with that out of the way, we know that health impact assessment has recently emerged in the U.S. as a promising potentially democracying a process that increases social and environmental justice. But we don't know a ton about it, and there's very little evaluation that has happened. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, I want to tell you a little bit about what HIA is. HIA, let's see, make sure we're here. HIA is a health impact assessment. It's analogous to an environmental assessment in the sense that it has a similar end goal to increase information for decision making. However, it does not enjoy a mandate as environmental impact assessment does, and because of that, it has more flexibility, but we're also kind of winging it in terms of how we know we're impacting things and how we're funded. So there will be a funding ask today. It is a process that analyzes the potential public health impacts of a proposed policy, program, or project, and the emphasis is on human health impacts as opposed to environmental impacts, which tend to stop at exposure. It includes 5 steps: screening, scoping, assessment, and reporting. And the 5th one is monitoring and evaluation. Of course, nobody ever has any money for that, and so that's why you do it as a doctoral dissertation. So what else do we know about HIA? HIA is targeted information. A lot of people think it is an advocacy tool, and in fact it is, but it's advocating to increase the public health for all. So it is really about increasing the public good. To that point, there are some underlying values that the practitioners take on. One is democracy. So in that realm, we are speaking to the right of people to participate in the decisions around their lives. The other is equity. The spatial distribution of people, homes, and transportation exists, and to the extent that that impacts people's health, we want to decrease that. There's also a way to conceive of HIA as communicating public health evidence, and to that point, we want to make sure that we're using the most transparent and rigorous evidence possible. This also means, though, that recommendations and even information is considered from all sources and evaluated impartially. So, if HIA exists out there, is it a way to influence transportation decisions? And if we are influencing transportation decisions, how? And who is doing the influencing? Is it the public health professionals performing these impact assessments, or is it the community? We're not really sure. And how would we know if it's the community? One of the really problematic aspects of this is that we know in the public participation literature that there's a tendency of public participation to resolve conflict by leaving out participants or ignoring issues. And so we want to make sure that that is not happening in this new field. So I looked at a few different literatures, and Jennifer Dill may or may not remember, she was there to witness it. One of the committee members looked at me and said, "It's absolutely not possible that this has not been covered." And I said, as God is my witness, I swear there are huge literature gaps. So I've looked at the participation negotiation theory literature and community-based participation and local knowledge literature. But what's really interesting is there's actually very, very little information out there about even environmental impact assessment in terms of what participation avenues are available to community members. So, and of course, less in health impact assessment. So that's kind of where I'm going with this. And the policy treatments, there are some there, but they're not as big as one might expect. So my hypothesis is that health impact assessment does provide additional information base for public decision making, and that it does so through a stakeholder participation structure, and that when that stakeholder participation structure explicitly includes community, the community voice will be heard. So I have some guiding research questions to help me along this path. One is, to what extent are HIAs participatory in nature? How can we describe what the community input element is? Who is defining the problem and or setting the agendas? Because we know that oftentimes what the initial problem definition is it really drives where we get to in the end. Is local knowledge integrated with professional knowledge? Are we actually taking in the knowledge of the people who are living and going to be impacted by these decisions? And finally, are local communities able to actually influence the decision? So how am I going about this? Well, the first thing I had to do was choose 3 cases. This is very baseline research. And at the time, I was looking at a very small population of cases. I defended the proposal. In 2010, there was only 61, and that was like doubling from 3 years previous. I checked last week, and there's 263 on this map, health impact assessment. So it's a growing field, whether we're evaluating it or not. The 3 cases I chose are all 3 transportation-related cases. The first is Clark County, Washington's bicycle pedestrian plan across the river. It is an active living health impact assessment for an active living plan. It's for a small, narrow plan for mostly the unincorporated areas of Clark County, and which is suburban and or rural. It was performed by the health department, and it was integrated within the plan as an appendix. The second one is the Lake Merritt, which is in Oakland, California, the Lake Merritt BART station area plan. This is an attempt to envision how to redevelop the station, the BART station, their commuter line, in Oakland's Chinatown as a transit-oriented development. It's a large city and a large plan. There was an outside consultant brought in to do the HIA, and it was completely external to the plan, by choice, as I found out in my interviews. The third case is the Long Beach Freeway, which we actually saw in the pictures earlier today, where the 6% increase in childhood asthma rate was floated. And that is to link the Long Beach and the ports of Long Beach and the ports of Los Angeles to the greater Los Angeles region. They want to expand that freeway to 12 lanes because everybody needs a 12-lane freeway in their backyard. And of course it goes through minority communities because that's where minority communities live. So it's an enormous plan and project. It involves multiple governments, and it's a difficult case to wrap your arms around, and it was also performed by an outside consultant. It was supposed to be integrated into the EIA, and that turned out to be a disaster. So how am I going about this? Well, one of the things that I want to show you today is that because there is so very little evaluation literature out there, is that I have also provided a way to go through and make some sense of what's happening here. And the first thing I do is I go through and I do an initial pass at kind of who is involved, the community, the different types of communities, their interests, and what they want to get out of both the plan and maybe the health impact assessment. I do this through mostly hand coding content analysis. Then I go through and I interview everybody who's been involved with the health impact assessment, and I ask them about their interests, what they thought about the process, why they were involved, what they thought happened. I go through that and refine my ideas about what everybody's interests are in the public decision. And then finally, I go through both the HIA report and the plan, and I try to link every single thing that could possibly be related to the health impact, the process of the health impact assessment and the report, and see if they're actually influencing. So, have I found anything? Well, I have. I know that the participation structure in the Clark County Bicycle Pedestrian Plan is a weak stakeholder model. The HIA author went to all planning meetings, but did not have an additional stakeholder advisory. The Lake Merritt BART station was a strong stakeholder model where there was a robust community-based organization advisory council that drew upon a Chinatown coalition that was interested in social justice. And in the I-710 case, there was nothing at all, and it wasn't for a lack of trying. It was actually a contractual obligation to keep it, quote, impartial. So, how are they defining who is defining the health problems? In the Clark County case, it was the HIA author. In the Lake Merritt case, it's the community-based organizations. And in the Long Beach case, it is the plan. Because when you have alternatives laid out, you can only discuss what's in those alternatives. Finally, I sought to understand what kind of local knowledge and information was being integrated. And one thing that will not surprise most people in this room, but is very surprising to public health people, is that maps really matter. And it's a very good way to show equity considerations. It was primarily professional-driven data in most cases. In the Lake Merritt BART case, they also relied heavily on their community-based organizations to document current conditions. All right, and yeah, in the Long Beach, they're not even allowed to share the report with local advocates. Disaster. We could have a whole nother day on that. All right, finally, influence. What kind of influence are we seeing? The draft HIAs are the most influential. And in the Clark County case, we do know that because they were there at the table, the public health people were able to include health into the infill sidewalk criteria prioritization plan. And so that's a really big thing, to actually have a concrete way we know that public health will continue to influence decisions. We also know that the HIA filled significant gaps in terms of organizing pedestrian interests, because bicycle interests are very organized, pedestrian interests not so much. In the Lake Merritt case, we know that also the initial letters and memos were far more influential than the actual report, but that doesn't mean that the report shouldn't happen, because it keeps the people meeting. Specific transportation facilities were considered, important cultural spaces were retained in order to continue doing things like Tai Chi, and specific design decisions such as pedestrian lighting can be traced back to the health impact assessment. Okay, so we know process, particularly early, is most influential. We know that you have to have a way to interact with community, and we know that map and GIS capacity matters. We also know that POW has bankrolled this up to this point, and they are about ready to let us be on our own. And so we need money. We need money badly, and I was told $1 million, so I want it all. And apply your inflation factor. But we need some full-time institutionalized support within our state and local governments. The state of Oregon has actually a really robust program going right now, and that would be the obvious place, but Metro would probably be a good place too. We also, through the state of Oregon, provide mini grants to local health departments that do not have the capacity to have a full-time person on their own. I would really encourage you to consider providing money to increase that program such that they can also evaluate their own health impact assessments, and we can grow this field that makes sure that our transportation decisions are community-based and community-driven.
Questions from the investors? Yes.
So one of the things in some of your slides was the who of not just who was present, but also who was conducting. So I'm just wondering if in future, you mentioned giving $500K to jurisdictions or agencies. I'm wondering if there's any consideration of control or further research in giving directly to community-based organizations.
There are, and there are some nonprofits that are doing this work and doing a very good job with it. But what we find is that the community-based organizations do not have the capacity to wade through, say, air pollution data at the scale that you need to provide information that decision makers want. And so it has to be a partnership, and most HIAs are in partnership.
So my question is, are there best practices in place for how to conduct these? Because I'm wondering if we start giving out grants to cities, are they going to know how to do it, or communities?
Yes, there are. There are best practices in place, and this has been done in Europe for a long time by the World Health Organization, and there is a robust and very quickly growing American organization, or North American organization, that is supporting that. There are also multiple organizations, some of them partnering with our own upstream and Oregon Public Health Institute in training. And so those bases have been covered in the last 3 or 4 years in terms of providing that infrastructure.
All
right, thank you.
We want around $1 million. Of course, we like to make that's 10.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, our next candidate is Adam Moore from PSU, analyzing the impacts of traffic levels on intersection and mid-block air quality.
All right, hi everyone. We're going to do this in 5 minutes. We're going to set some land speed records. All right, so my name's Adam Moore, and I'm going to talk to you about my project, which is analyzing the impacts of traffic on roadside air quality. And what I mean when I say that is we're looking at exposure for travelers to air pollution for all roadway users. When I say travelers, what I mean, just to very simply say it, is people in vehicles taking public transportation, and bicyclists and pedestrians. In my research, I typically focus on those who take public transportation and bicyclists and pedestrians, and I'm asking the key question, what factors affect exposure to air pollution? And we can kind of generalize again and break this down a little bit more and say that it might be the built environment factors, vehicle activity, and meteorological conditions like wind, temperature, and relative humidity. And while it's not necessarily novel by any means to ask the question, what factors affect exposure to air pollution, what we're doing that's really novel in this regard is the way we're looking at it is with extremely high-resolution data using empirical data that we collect ourselves in the field. We're doing this at about 10-second resolution, which is, from the best that I can find, almost unheard of. Usually, we're making compromises either between how we're measuring the vehicles or how we're measuring the air quality, either in time or spatial resolution. And I'm going to get into it just a little bit, but we're really looking at this in levels that are unheard of. And so what I'm going to do now is I want to just go through an example of a recent project that just got completed, and it's a very good example of where I'm headed in the future. And this project was done on Powell Boulevard. For those of you unfamiliar, it's located right here. Downtown's right there. Powell is a very busy street. It's a arterial roadway that connects the suburbs with downtown. It's used by commuters, and we typically see about 40,000 vehicles daily, up to 1,800 during peak hours. So there's a lot of vehicles on this roadway. What makes Powell really interesting and what makes it valuable to us is that it's been outfitted by Portland Bureau of Transportation with several different types of technologies to monitor vehicles as they move throughout the roadway. Radar sensors located at 2 different locations, which give us the speed and the classification and the counts of the vehicles going past. We can measure the time that a vehicle takes to move throughout the corridor by collecting the signal that your Bluetooth phone or car is emitting as you travel. It's anonymous, don't worry. And we also have signal loops located at several intersections, which are used to time the signals, but we can also collect turning vehicle movements with those. So we have a lot of different information about where vehicles are moving. Powell is obviously then a very highly instrumented corridor, so you have all this great vehicle information, and that makes it a bring your own air quality equipment corridor. Wow. We're still working on how to pronounce that. So,
but it's hashtagable.
Yeah, it's going to be hashtag, yeah. So what I want to do right now then is just show you what a typical BYO AQE setup looks like. We use temporary setups right on the side of the roadway. Right here we're located just right on the sidewalk, just a few feet from the roadway on Powell. And I want to walk through all the different equipment that we have set up here, or actually just a little bit of it, to give you a picture of how we collect this air quality information, and then I'm going to show you how we combine it with the vehicle information. So right here, this is one of our pieces of equipment that's measuring an actual pollutant called fine particulate matter. This is regulated by the EPA, and it's very valuable for us to collect this information. We also, like I mentioned, are collecting meteorological information. We have an ultrasonic anemometer that's collecting wind speed and direction, and we're also collecting temperature, relative humidity. We have video reference that we set up so that we can, if we find anything interesting after we go back and we're processing our data, we can then go watch our video and see if anything happened that we didn't notice at the time. And finally, right across the street there, it's very hard to see in these pictures, but we have our radar detector that I mentioned set up. And so we're gathering vehicle information at the exact same spot that we're collecting our air quality information. So very valuable information there. And with this vehicle alone, just with the, I call it a Wavetronics device, just with our Wavetronics, we get information that looks like this. This is for one day that we were out there. It's the entire day. This is May 1st of this year. And you can see that we have very detailed information about the volume, the speed, and the percentage of time that a particular lane was occupied during the interval.
I think I see your father up there at the top.
We get really valuable information, including, like you can see what I have outlined here, are breakdowns in the speed. This is the morning commute time that I've outlined, and you can see there was quite clearly congestion right there. Very coincidentally, this was the exact same time that we were out measuring air quality, so isn't that convenient? And when we combine our traffic information with our pollutant information, here's our fine particulate matter for that time period. We can add temperature, relative humidity, wind speed for all of those different variables, and put that into a regression model, and out we get some very interesting and almost, some of these are not seen before, results. We see that we have correlated increases in particulate matter when vehicles are platooning. In other words, when they all leave a previous intersection at the same time, they're moving in a group. That's an increase when vehicles are passing as the wind blows across the roadway towards the monitoring station, and when congestion worsens. And these are all very intuitive. I think a lot of you will go, duh, of course. Emissions are going to get, exposure is going to get worse when congestion worsens. But this is one of the first times we're able to quantify that, and that's very important from a policy point of view. And when wind blows across the neighborhoods, we see decreases, and when temperature increases, we see decreases. So here's my pitch. This stuff isn't cheap. One single piece of air quality equipment can be about $10,000, and then for the purpose of our inflations, we're going to bump that up to $100,000. We need a lot of these. What we can do if we get more money, more funding, is we can put more of these temporary stations throughout the city at different built environment locations, because as of right now, we only have the one on Powell. So why not try out some different streets, local neighborhoods, whatnot, and we want to really get a better picture of what bicyclists, pedestrians, and public transportation users are experiencing, are being exposed to as they move throughout the built environment. There we go.
Thank you. Yes.
So just looking at the equipment that you have deployed on the road, I'm wondering, have you noticed any distractions from motorists going by? And if so, have you given any thought to permanent installations where you might be able to hide the equipment a little bit better?
Hiding the equipment and putting it out permanently, more importantly, is paramount. We would love to be able to do that. As of right now, we can only temporarily deploy these things for an hour or two at a time, as long as the poor grad student is willing to sit out there in the cold and the rain. We haven't noticed any direct effects of vehicle distraction. About the biggest thing that ever happened was we had some boxes set on the side of the street just while we were unloading equipment. A TriMet bus pulled up to let on passengers. We were right at a stop, and the bus driver was very excited. She saw the empty box, and she asked us if we had any kittens inside of it. So that's the most distraction we've seen so far.
I don't see kittens up there.
Yeah, it's under maintenance.
That's the control. really read the question. Because it seems like Powell, is the study corridor because it's hooked up. But I'm wondering, is this replicable in other corridors without, that Bluetooth radar?
Yeah, other corridors you can spy on people.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it spying on people. We do have temporarily deployable radar counters that can do the exact same thing that these permanently set up monitors have. So I can tell you that yes, it is possible, and in this scenario of funding requests and whatnot, we can request funding for these temporary setups that we can have out there. Yeah, so we can do places other than Powell, is my point.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks.
And batting cleanup is Alex Bigazzi from PSU. Bicyclists intake of traffic-related air pollution. Are you sensing a theme?
Fantastic. So I'm going to straddle the last two speakers a little bit because we're going to be talking about health and air quality. So thank you all for your rapt and undivided attention this afternoon. I am Alex Bigazzi, and my dissertation topic is not just exposure and not just intake, but actually uptake of traffic-related air pollutants. So we'll start with the tale of two routes. So we have a bike commuter down in southeast Portland heading into the city, and she could either take a fairly direct route along surface streets, or she can go almost 2 miles out of her way to take a path along the river. And there's a lot of considerations into what route she takes, but she's interested in quantifying what are the pollution differences between these two routes to help her decide if those extra 6 minutes are worth it. Well, it turns out that's a pretty difficult question to answer, because we can start with the pollution emissions levels along the roadways, but then we also have to consider the local meteorology, the wind that dispersed the pollutants and lead to a certain air quality concentration. Then we can look at the routes and then assess the intensity and the duration of exposures. But because she's an active traveler, her respiration is also affected by roadway characteristics like grade and speed. So you have to consider respiration and how that affects the inhalation of pollutants. And then physical activity also relates to your actual uptake rate, or the incorporation of pollutants into your body. And it's the uptake of the pollutants that ultimately lead to the negative health effects. Right? So it's a long pathway, and frankly, it's not real well quantified yet in the literature. And a lot of that's because of a lack of direct measurements of these variables, exposures, respiration, uptake, et cetera, for on-road bicyclists. Well, to address that, we've undertaken some pretty interesting research here at Portland State University. It's an ongoing project funded by the fantastic OTREC organization, as well as our local municipalities. And so we're actually measuring on-road the exposure concentrations, respiration characteristics, and the uptake of pollutants by the bicyclists. Now, the uptake uses a very new technique where we're sampling their breaths in the field, in breath sampling bags, and bring it back to the lab for gas analysis. And this has provided the first direct empirical evidence to date that different bicycle facility types and different route choices can affect the uptake of pollutants into the bicyclist's body. And that's pretty exciting research, I think, because I dork out about that stuff. But there's some limitations, too. There always are, right? So one of the limitations is that we're using a really highly instrumented bicycle, and this thing was about $10,000 with all the equipment that's on it. And that's great because we're getting a lot of high-resolution data, but we're just not getting that much of it, right? And so that's a limitation. So over the past year plus, I've been working on something that I've developed, and I spent a lot of time on this acronym. It's called the Portland ACE, right? The Portable, Low-Cost, and Networked Device for Assessing Cyclists' Exposure. It's one of the most, I've learned a lot in grad school, and the importance of acronyms is one of the key features. So the Portland ACE, what it is, it's an integrated device that brings in a lot of these sensors that are the same dimensions or the same types of data as on the instrumented bicycle, but just using much lower cost sensors that have a lot lower resolution as well. So you're really looking at a trade-off with the Portland ACE where you're giving up some of the precision of the data for a much lower cost device. And it's also a lot simpler to use because it integrates the data and it synchronizes everything, and it streams it over Bluetooth to a custom app on a smartphone. And so anyone can kind of use it. So you're giving up some of the precision of the data, but the upshot is that for the price of one of these highly instrumented bicycles, you can get approximately 50 Portland ACE devices and distribute them to cyclists for weeks at a time. And so you get a lot, and so crowdsourcing the data like this, you can get a lot bigger spatial and temporal coverage for the on-road exposure concentrations. As well, you also get a broader sample of the population for the physiological measurements as well. And there's something else I was going to say there. All right, so what am I proposing? So I'd like to continue the highly instrumented on-road bicycle data collections as well as expanding the breath concentration measurements, and then augment these data with, by manufacturing and distributing 100, 200, 500 Portland ACE devices to bicyclists all around metropolitan areas in the Oregon state. That's awkward. And so doing this, we could easily compile the largest database to date of on-road exposure concentrations for bicyclists. And this leads to new information in terms of how cyclists can reduce their own exposure, but also how to integrate pollution concerns into bicycle facility design and planning, which right now it's just not in there. If you look at the Portland bike plan, air quality isn't explicitly listed in any of the facility guidance documentation in there. So, and then if funding is available, then these type of things could also be extended to the other population, traveling population with heightened pollution exposure risk, which is pedestrians. And yeah, so the detailed cost analysis is in Appendix Q of our proposal. But just to summarize, we'll need approximately $40 million in $2. I've already secured matching funds, so from you we'll just need $20 million in $1 to complete all of this to a gold standard. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Questions from the investors, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm interested in when you are, I think it's a great project and good work, by the way, and I want to ride your bike if I ever get a shot.
Sure. It's so big.
If you are going to parse out the different types of pollutants in the area and how that, what those pollutants are linked to normally in terms of negative health consequences?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we're measuring 5 different classes of pollutants, but one of those is volatile organic compounds, and that's the one we're actually sampling breath samples of. And when you take that back, you're actually measuring dozens and dozens of different compounds. So they're all, if you look at, EPA models, they'll just call it volatile organic compounds, which is mostly hydrocarbons, benzene, stuff like that. But there's dozens of individual compounds in there, and we're looking at the individual behavior of different ones. And one of the angles we're looking at in particular is we've measured basically the headspace over. I'm going to get too much in here, but basically trying to identify what's from diesel sources and what's from gasoline sources, because they have different exhaust signatures, different compound mixtures, basically. So you can do a little bit of that, and we haven't been able to get that in the breath samples yet, but we do have the data from the exhaust profiles for that.
More. Is it okay? I feel like I'm asking a lot of questions. So I'm just curious, like how are your two dissertations different in terms of how it can be applied in future? Does this make any sense?
Are you referring to Mr. Moore?
Yes, Mr. Moore. Thank you. Yes, the Honorable Mr. Moore.
The Honorable Mr. Moore. Well, one of the things is I'm looking at health more directly in terms of respiration, uptake, and physiology components of it, as opposed to looking at exposure concentrations at a fixed spot. So it's kind of a different approach, and mine's more modal in effect, because right now I'm just looking at bicyclists, and he's looking at more spatially singular event and looking at that in more detail. I don't know.
I feel like you could maybe simplify it to say that I'm looking at what is influencing the pollution in the air, and you're looking at what's influencing the pollution that's sticking in your body.
Yeah, I don't know.
That clears everything up. Well, I appreciate most of you sticking to the 5-minute timeline. But I have to say I'm disappointed. Where are the jetpacks? They promised us jetpacks back in the 80s, and I'm still waiting for my personal jetpack. So I'd like to pitch jetpacks. $40 million for jet. Yes, exactly. Let's, first of all, I want all the candidates to rise, and let's give them a hand. Those were great presentations. Thank you. Excellent. And while you're standing, get out, all right? We're going to call you in about 10 minutes. Go put your feet up. Try not to worry. We're just going to have a little talk about you. All right, as I mentioned earlier, on your chair is a ballot. Those of you in the audience, and the studio audience is going to help us determine the People's Choice Award while our investors here have a little chat about the different candidates. And can we close that back door, please? Thank you. All right, so my first question for you all is what presentations, what parts of presentations really popped out for you?
Well, I'll go first. Yeah. Mine were the ones that were talking about health decisions. You know, it's the first time in American history where average life expectancy is on the decline, and it's due to chronic diseases that are largely preventable. Oh, you can't hear me?
And you're being recorded.
Oh, and I'm being recorded. So.
This is your good side?
I was really interested in the studies that were talking about the health impacts because for the first time in American history, the average life expectancy is on the decline, and this is due to chronic illnesses that are largely preventable. So healthcare is eating up more and more of public funding and taking it away from other possible funding structures. So any way to improve people's health, I think, is a way it's a win-win. People have longer lives, get to be with their families and loved ones longer, and we spend less on healthcare and make more money available for other projects.
You know, I think if you're looking at some of these things, for me, what's new, what's adding to the research, what's an innovative idea that's not otherwise been looked at, I think, is a piece of that, and definitely I think some of the candidates were doing that, and I think some of it too is being able to make an ask, this will make an ask, but that's just an aside. But I think in terms of the research itself, it's really what's new and adding to how we look at making transportation decisions.
So I think yes. I'm with you, and I guess I feel like also looking at health impacts that are along corridors. I think air quality. I think it would be really awesome to see a future dissertation on noise pollution as well, because I think that's something that we haven't heard a lot about, but. I'm really excited. You see Coalition for a Livable Future and others that have developed a 2.0 equity atlas, which is totally awesome. So additional research that can be overlaid on that looks at how our transportation funding choices are impacting communities of color, particularly in low-income communities on particular corridors that were historically created to bisect those same communities and what's happened historically. I think that was something that resonated with me, and also the first Ms. Sirisha, hers talking about like some of the data that we don't know, and other. It would be exciting to see dissertations that look at the data that we don't have and try to perhaps backfill, but also look at future dissertations that potential dissertations that identify how we collect data and how we can do it better so that it's more accessible. Because we're still on microfiche for some things. It's ridiculous. Okay.
So I was looking at the research from the things that I thought would be particularly innovative or something I just hadn't heard before. Also very interested in the health impacts. I was looking at it also more from a personal perspective, and I'm participating in the September Bike Commute Challenge, and so there was a couple of these that really resonated with me, the right turn hooks and the safety impacts of that, because I've had a few near misses. And I've actually given thought to this uptake issue as I've been biking along Barber Boulevard, and so that one's really intriguing to me from a personal perspective. I do need to declare one conflict of interest. So as you noted, I make my money off of photo radar, and Mohammed's presentation does look like it could reduce red light running, so I'm just opposed to that philosophically.
So there's a lot of data in their presentations. There's a lot of data gathering and research that's going on. Did any of you have an aha moment about practical use of that information in finding solutions to some of these transportation issues like the health problems? I stumped the panel.
Go, Stephanie.
Okay, thank you. I just think it's awesome. I mean, it's awesome in a horrible way, but it's kind of awesome looking at what different fuel choices, how that impacts your lungs. I mean, that's super cool and horrible, but also cool. So, my mom was a nurse, so that's my.
And your dad's
and my dad, God bless him, he is very compliant now.
It seems to me that you're actually missing a lot of data in a lot of ways. So what you kept hearing often, well, we don't really have good data for this. We don't have good data for that. We're having to stretch. We're creating a way of gathering information. If there's anything, I mean, we can probably extrapolate intellectual that breathing in, diesel emissions is bad for you. We can make those assumptions, so we can make the leap. But being able to quantify it, and it's not only the pieces that we counted today and that you're breathing it in today, but if you're going to do health studies, and you have to track that individual over an arc of time to see if there truly is an impact. Again, so we're not doing conjecture. We're doing real research, and then at the physiological level, it's doing it's taking issue on our health. The other piece of that, I think, is in addition to the health impacts by the fuel choices, other types we use, but also looking at the safety of the system as it is today, as it impacts. So I think the bike piece was interesting to me today, because how we actually set up our systems so they are as safe as they can be as we operate multiple kinds of vehicles on road systems or train systems, or however we look at it. We're keeping people as safe as possible. So I think the aha, what's really just more the ongoing, we need to get more data in a lot of places, and we're thinking about it in new and different ways.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I used loggery in a sentence yesterday, promising on someone else, and now I'm visiting it on you guys. But I think one thing that actually the HIA one really just brought up a question that some of us have been mulling for a while, and that is, as we're trying to get more data to inform our transportation choices, where is that impacting who we can get data from? Like, if we're asking for more information and more information, given the amount of time that people don't have, given the trust that people don't have in some agencies to give that information in the first place, it was just a question that rose for me. Like, are we kind of self-denying some aspects of research based on the profundity of data that we seek?
So I'm going to give these guys like 5 minutes to confer and put their numbers down. You can either talk among yourselves or go out and get a breath of fresh air. But let's convene at 1:15 for the unveiling of the investments. All right. Well, apparently some of our panelists thought it was real money and put a huge amount of thought into this. First of all, you all did a fantastic job. I mean, this is tough. 5 minutes to pitch something you've been working on for, days and days. So again, thanks to all of our contestants, candidates, and we wish you the best of luck in the future. But let's get to the fun part here. Okay, so our panel actually had some pretty good conversations while you were out, and I'm going to tell you the top 3, 3, 2, 1, in order. Coming in, yes, let's get this little, okay. All right, here we go, ready? Coming in at number 3, Adam Moore. Coming in at number 2, and I'm going to mispronounce your name, Medha Jannat. Where'd you go? There she is. Did you stuff the ballot box? I saw you picking up all those slips and writing your name on them. Okay. And of course, number 2 has to fill in for number 1 if he or she is unable to complete his duties, her duties. And number 1, let's hear it drum roll. Alex Bigazzi. Okay, we have. How much money does he get? Oh, Alex, you get $10.75 million. People, that's 500,000 Portland Ace devices. and Medha, you get $8 million. And Adam gets $7.75 million. Very close. So are you ready for the People's Choice? The ones that you voted for? Drum roll, please. Our People's Choice Award for the Oregon Transportation, and who will fulfill the duties, whatever, is Alex. Thank you all for playing, and we hope you have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next year at the next Boom Pow Dissertation Showcase. And thanks to our investors.